All right, so I decided to make a little list here of the benefits of cycling, right? I mean, it's something that people are constantly talking about on YouTube. So, let's cover the benefits of cycling here. This is just sort of a perfunctory list, right? So, first of all, you've got clothing snobbery, all right? And that's not to say that cyclists are clothing snobs, but there's certain things that a rider is willing to wear and certain things that a rider is not willing to wear. For example, team kits, fan team kits, event kits, club kits, all these sorts of things. Um, Clothing snobbery is definitely very important because, right, it's your paint job. So it's sort of what image of you is projected. And I'm not going to spend too much time on each subject as there are quite a few things that could be considered benefits. Anyway, being aware is what I'm saying. Not that it makes you a clothing snob, but yeah, your kit. What kit you're wearing, what kit you're not willing to wear, brands that you're willing to wear and not wear. We won't get in depth into that. All right. Also, so the next thing would be food guru level nutrition, right? I mean, I'd say one of the most advanced things that there is in the realm of nutrition is understanding to eat with a purpose. Obviously, you want to eat carbs before doing a long bike ride. Um, I won't get super in depth into this either, but fat digests slowly, carbs digest quickly, especially sugar, and then of course you have the protein. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, you become a food guru basically because one thing works and another thing doesn't, and that's it. So you'll figure it out or you'll be bad at cycling. What about heightened laundry skills, right? Cycling kits are very expensive. So thou shalt learn how to uh, do laundry do laundry in such a way that you don't destroy your kit, right? You got to know how to do laundry, and of course, that makes you better at doing all of your laundry. It's a thing you'll pay attention to when you buy a skin suit that costs $350 or whatever the latest skin suits cost, right? There's also an incentive to learn to sew. I mean, if you're a bike racer, even just pinning numbers is essentially a sewing activity because you're pinning numbers to a jersey. I mean, pinning fabric to another fabric, that is like a thing that you do before you're about to do some sewing. And of course, it encourages sewing because if you have a seam pop when you're at the race, you may not have another kit to wear. So, yeah, it makes you want to learn how to sew because when a seam pops in your $350 skin suit, you're probably going to fix the seam instead of like replacing the skin suit, throwing it away, etc. So yeah, there's definitely an incentive to learn to sew. Weather forecasting, obviously, you can't be a good cyclist and plan a 3-hour ride if you're planning to ride into a severe thunderstorm. So I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's one of the only things that cancels a bike race, besides impassable snow and ice, would be a severe thunderstorm. So you're going to develop some weather forecasting skills if you're planning a bike packing weekend and there's going to be like a monsoon flood hurricane showing up at the time. It's probably not going to be wise to continue on with your bike packing weekend. So weather forecasting, you better have some, unless you're only doing very short rides very close to home. It's a skill that you ought to get, you probably will, and you will as a result of cycling. Also first aid, because it's not a matter of if you crash, but when you crash. Or wait, no, vice versa. It's not a matter of, yeah, that's it. It's a matter of when you'll crash, right? Because you'll crash eventually. I mean, geez, you're going to bump your leg on a top tube or something at some point in time and learn that you ought to ice it down before it swells up. First aid skills, you'll have them. What about aerospace engineering skills, right? The analysis of your aerodynamics on the bike would be an aerospace engineering skills. I mean, the same skills that make you good at creating and flying a paper airplane apply. And it's insane how different things carry over. Cycling, a lot of things have to carry over if you want to be good. Next, let's move on to a completely different subject here, physical and mental endurance, right? Because you're going to have to endure some stuff, right? You're going to be cold, hot, wet, sometimes, perhaps, depending on how much crazy stuff you do and how extreme you get and how serious you get and so forth. You'll have to endure something at some point if you're going to ride up a hill. I mean, yeah, okay, if you're going to just ride on a beach cruiser all day at 8 miles an hour, you might not endure very much. But for the most part, some physical and mental endurance is going to be involved in the sport of cycling. And that said, in sort of a related thing, the ability to ignore shit. You know, stupid stuff happens constantly. Pointless things are happening all around you all the time, and you have the ability to sort of block those out, right? Well, you better if you're going to be a good cyclist, because there's going to be a lot of stuff to take in, and you'll have to leave a lot of that stuff behind, both in a transience of action way as well as in a you have to ignore it sort of way, right? You have to be able to ignore stuff or you'll be bad at cycling, or you won't be good at the very least. Also, you should be well-rounded. You'll be traveling. I mean, participating in the sport itself is typically traveling. Yes, of course, if you're riding on a track or an indoor spin class or your trainer at home or whatever, rollers, you might not really be going anyplace, but typically you are, so be well-rounded. What about foreign cultures and the language barrier? I mean, lots of people from different languages are often participating in the sport at the same time, so it's a great way and incentive to learn languages and how to pronounce people's names and all kinds of stuff that you would not have otherwise done, perhaps. Let's go back in a different direction again to materials science. Materials science, right? There's all these materials flying at you constantly. You gotta have an idea of the difference. You know, ABS, polystyrene, carbon, cork, graphene, titanium, aluminum, steel. So, you got to know a little bit about material science. Or perhaps you might be a little bit in the dark, right? The mastery of trails and roads, right? Sort of it's a thing you got to know about. Not necessarily the mastery of, but, the code of the trail and the road, right? There's a transience to the road and trail itself. Don't block it. You know what I mean? Lead, follow, or get out of the way. All of those sorts of things. All of that stuff plays in. The more riding you do and the more people that you ride with. Travel skills, because of course, again, it is traveling. So the transience of cycling itself is like the transience of life. So you're learning to pack and plan ahead and all these sorts of things, because otherwise you will ride yourself into the ground. Planning, of course, as I just mentioned. Cooking and mentorship, right? I mean, my cycling mentor happened to also be my cooking mentor, as he was a chef when I started bike racing. So that was how I got involved in the sport. A guy who was a mountain bike racer and worked at the restaurant at which I worked had a very, very nice bike, a Klein Attitude, with all kinds of upgrades on it. And that's how I got into bike racing. One day I asked him, "Hey, is that bike good?" And he was like, "What? Oh yeah, I mean, why do you think it costs so much money? Over $4,000 in the late 1990s was an expensive bike." So yeah, that's, you'll get involved in things like cooking and perhaps coaches, mentors, all kinds of club activity, team activity, listening to podcasts. Shout out to Mitch Boyer and Phil Gaimon. And of course, GCN and all the rest of the channels that we watch regularly, right? All of this stuff figures in. And of course, there is a culture. I'll get to that in a moment. What about efficiency skills, right? You got to be efficient or you won't be a good cyclist. For obvious reasons, in many different reasons, right? And of course, there is a difference between a pro and an amateur. The difference is pros take a break from cycling. Amateurs take a break to go cycling. See what I'm saying? One goes on vacation from cycling, one goes on vacation to go cycling. That's sort of the difference, in my opinion, between a pro and a non-pro. Also, like racing skills, right? There's all kinds of skills associated with racing, of all kinds of racing. Lines, tires, all the sorts of things that go together with racing. The course, planning for the whole event, sponsors, all of the stuff that has to go with competition. And of course, competition is fantastic because it advances the sport. Next, physics skills. This is all kind of tied together, right? Things like friction and mass and torque and power to weight ratio and speed, momentum and calories. And all of these science terms, like you better know what they mean. And you got biology skills, you get like metabolic, catabolic, anabolic, carbohydrate, protein, fat, glycogen, supplements, etc. Of course, you got to pay attention to things like sleep or you'll be bad. Your recovery will suck if you're not good at sleep, and that's not going to get you very far, right? General social skills, right? Because you'll never get as far as if you ride with a group. There's this whole effect of like a flock of geese or a school of fish, that not only is there safety in numbers, but there's added efficiency in numbers. In that way, cycling is a lot like surfing in that you are riding a wave of low pressure. When you're in a pack of 80 riders on a windy day, like in the middle of the pack, you're not feeling the wind, period. I mean, it's just completely blocked. There are all these vortexes all around you. And yeah, it is a social activity for sure. And it is impossible to reach the top of your skills if you don't race. I mean, once you get to a certain point, you have to be in a mode where you're pushing yourself to the maximum, which will not happen typically, except in a race environment. And also the pushing of limits, right? That's another thing. Sometimes you can advance the science of a certain type of material or a certain type of technique. You're a living laboratory, pushing limits. It's great. Health and fitness. Let's don't forget life hacks. There are all kinds of life hacks that will come out as a result of the sport of cycling. Also carry over to other sports, situations. There may be all kinds of carryover to different sports and situations. If you have very high foot-eye coordination, like you're a skateboarder or a ballet dancer or something like that, that will all affect your ability to ride the bike. I mean, and also don't forget things like insane foot-eye coordination that's built by cycling, analysis skills like data, effort, aerodynamics, plan, routine, training, nutrition, workflow, innovation, tips, tricks. There's a unique culture to cycling, of course. There's a rabbit hole that never ends with respect to the sport of bicycling, right? One of the deepest rabbit holes of any sport, perhaps the deepest rabbit hole of any sport, as there are more different specialized disciplines, and there's a world championships for everything nowadays. And I mean, it's the best life sport because, look, there's a world championships for the 100 plus age division, folks. I mean, it's the ultimate life sport. It's like zero impact. So, you know, people that have all kinds of other health problems, they can still ride a bike, including missing limbs, in case you were wondering. Of course, the ecological efficacy of cycling, it is the most efficient means ever devised to transport humans. Cycling, the bicycle, there's no more efficient means ever devised. So there's that. Let's see, what else do you have? There's all kinds of lifestyle stuff, like you may go around with a cycling hat on when you're not on the bike, in which case you look kind of a little bit fanboyish, but whatever. There's lifestyle stuff. And just for the record, I'm not one of those lifestyle guys. I consider cycling to be a sport. And look, everybody has a different take on it. Part of the reason why I go fast sometimes, when I'm capable of doing so, is because I've got other stuff to do, right? That's one of the incentives to ride fast, because you get to lunch earlier, which means you get to the next thing earlier, right? So, yeah, so there's that. Yeah. It's also an alternative to mainstream sports. If you don't like basketball, hockey, football, and baseball in the U.S., cycling is it the top alternative? I mean, I think it might be the top alternative. Let me know in the comments what you think. And as far as like participation of everyday people, I'm pretty sure bike racing's got a little bit more participation, at least in the adult categories, than any of the mainstream sports. Not too many people are out there playing baseball, football, hockey. Maybe soccer is the next. I don't know. Which, by the way, I also enjoy and have in my bloodline. Also, let's see. You get networking opportunities. Of course, everybody's wearing all kinds of stuff on their kit that's often relevant to reality. It's easier and easier to get a kit with what you want on it. So that's fantastic. You get this networking opportunity, also advertising. You get the group dynamics of riding in a group, which is spectacular. You've got governing bodies that form in order to objectively govern the sports. That's always good. The UCI, the USA Cycling, whatever, governing bodies, whether you like them or not, they have to exist in a competitive arena. Club activities, of course, you've got all the activities of your local cycling clubs all around the country and indeed world. Many of those carry over. For example, if you have a RAFA membership, you can go rent a bike all around the world to help plan your vacation thusly. Yeah, all kinds of opportunities there with cycling clubs, and your club probably has sister clubs that you may not have even ever heard of. Also, long-held traditions, whether it's Paris-Roubaix, the Tour de France, your local race, or other events that happen every year, like on the same weekend. That's always fantastic to have this like tradition every year, and do a thing, do a ride, whatever. Also, the danger. You might think that's a bad thing, but interestingly enough, from the psychological perspective, it seems that the danger itself might actually be a draw to the sport. It could be the reason why running indoors is not kept at as high of a level of efficacy as running outdoors. So I suspect the danger itself actually plays a role, or perhaps it's just the reverence of nature. Who knows? Also, longevity, of course, you're going to be fitter, and as a result of being fitter, you'll live longer. It's the ultimate life sport. I mentioned that earlier. There's a 100 plus division for like every aspect of cycling. So if you're 100 plus years old, you can still compete. It's pretty berserk. And of course, there's almost zero impact. So that does encourage you to do other things also, to do stuff like maintain bone density, because cycling doesn't help too much with that, especially for above the waist bone density for obvious reasons. So combined with resistance training, I mean, it's sort of the ultimate overall program when you think of it. So yeah, and technological advancement, that figures in as well, as bikes keep getting faster and better, and riders and all the technology keeps getting better and faster, and everything keeps getting better and better and better, and that's just fantastic. So, and of course, you got to know, to close out the video, not just a little bit of health stuff, but some pretty advanced health stuff. You'd better know about it. Otherwise, you will not be that good. So yeah, that's a pretty long video about some of the benefits of cycling that I just came up with on a quick list that I wrote down, a couple of days ago. Because, and of course, I'm sure I've missed some. So let us know in the comments what benefits we've missed in the video. And, if you're an influencer, share the content with your viewers. Feel free to add on and give me a ring. Talk to you soon, everybody. And, yeah, send us links to your YouTube channel with videos on the bike about stuff we missed and whatever. Because, like I said in the video, networking is good. Anyway, see you soon. Don't be a stranger. And, I've been your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-O-Mash, signing off. And until next time, may that solar wind be at your back.